All right, I think I will go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we can get started. And if more people trickle in, that's great. So if we want to start with roll call, Courtney, would you mind doing that for me?
Yes. Vaughn Jones or Kirk Will?
Yep, Kirk's here.
Morning, Kirk. Amy Moyer. He's not yet with us. John Ring.
Present.
Morning, John.
Morning.
Commissioner Jody Shattuck McNally.
Present. Happy Monday.
Morning. Brett Wolk. Hey, Brett.
Here, my volume works.
Katie McGrath Novak.
Here.
And Commissioner Veronica Medina.
Here.
Great. We do have quorum this morning.
Thank you so much. Cool. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I really appreciate it. I know this was kind of a last minute addition, but I'm glad that most people were able to make it work. Let's do the approval of the, I just want to acknowledge Amy has joined as well. If you all got a chance to read through the last meeting minutes, I would welcome a motion to approve those.
Madam Chair, I will move to approve the minutes from our previous meeting as presented.
Thank you. Could I have a second?
Second.
We got multiple seconds. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. Those meetings passed. Thank you so much. So I will go ahead and get started. I have a kind of an activity plan to try and get through some of the ideas that we've been toying around with. What I would like to do today is put some more detail to those ideas and set up a plan for any last minute research that we need to do. Just as a reminder of our timeline, we've got this meeting and then we have one more meeting before the full council meeting. So I'm hoping by the end of today, we can have some fairly detailed recommendations. Next meeting, we'll add any finishing touches, tie any bows, and put some good solid research behind anything that we come up with. And then that way we have stuff to present for the full council February meeting. We did send out a meeting with some pre-work. It got sent out on Friday. I know that wasn't the most amount of time for everyone. So I'm gonna start the meeting with a little bit of just quiet review of the matrix that we sent out. So if you did not have a chance to look through it and do the pre-work, now is your chance to do that. And I'll remind you all what that was. If you did have a chance to do the pre-work, this is your chance to go back through and read what other people have written, do some reflection, think of any questions that you might have. And then we are also, part of the pre-work was to prioritize using little plus signs. But if you did your pre-work first, maybe there's stuff that's been added since you looked. So I'm just going to copy and paste some instructions in the chat. And thank you, Courtney, for sharing the Google Doc. Let me know if you can't access the Google Doc. So first things first, just read through. We're looking at the first tab, not the second tab yet. So as you read, add in any key themes that you think that you're missing and any additional recommendations that you think might address any of those barriers listed on the left. And then if you read a recommendation, there are details you want to add, please go ahead and do that. And then lastly, go through the recommendations. The recommendations are in columns. Sorry, it's hard to see this screen. Oh, sorry. I think they're in columns F through H. And go ahead and put a plus sign next to the top, I don't know, maybe like 2 or 3 that you think are the most important for us to address. And then I'll give you maybe like 7 minutes to do this. If we need more time, I'll add more time. And then after that, we'll go through the ones that are the top recommendations and we'll really dive into a couple of those. Does anyone have any questions about that or any trouble accessing the document? All right, cool. So with that, I'll just do some quiet work amongst yourselves for a few minutes.
Am I the only one that's having trouble advancing up so I can see the in those columns? I see one little thin layer and then I just not advancing for me. I'm not sure.
Yeah, mine's the same way. I'm trying to cruise through it here.
Sorry,
Yeah.
what is your problem with it?
When we get down to the columns, you can I'm not sure what level it is. I can't get maybe I'm just not perusing this kind of spread this stuff. I can't identify points in all the titles. Is it more than one level or we just put the pluses there? I just
Yeah, no, there should be more. I think I think that's what I was having trouble with too. Let me see if I can.
yeah, I can't advance down to read any details. I apologize. I'm trying. So I've tried every little trick I know.
That's okay. I'm gonna maybe hide these top 2 big columns. I won't delete them. I'm just gonna hide them. Does this help at all? To be able to see more?
That might help. Because I know it, yeah, because they
Yeah,
were
that's significantly better.
Yeah, sorry about that. I think
I
we
to make my view like 75%, but then it makes the text pretty small. So,
okay.
yeah, that seems better.
I think it's probably because I uploaded an Excel document into Google Sheets, which mostly works, but sometimes is a little finicky.
We also might want to just do some stars, or sometimes when you put a plus, the spreadsheet thinks you're trying to do a right.
Yeah, good point. Okay, yeah, a star is fine if the plus sign is not
We'll
working.
figure it out.
I think if you put the plus sign after the words, then it will be okay. I think if you start the plus sign, then it would be a problem.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. We'll figure it out. It's always hard to do these things on a shared document. Also, I'm not sure if you already are, but if you're not a formal member of the committee, I would still invite you to give feedback in the spreadsheet. I'm going to give a couple more minutes, and then I'll start moving into some discussion. All right. Do people feel like you've had enough time? Do you want a little bit more time? Are we good?
I haven't finished quite all the way. I'm on like the last one, but could also move forward if folks are ready.
Okay. What about others?
Did you say how you wanted us to do prioritization? It sounded like pluses weren't working. So
Yeah, if you just want to do, I'll count plus signs or stars.
what I'm not seeing where these are at.
These are in columns G through I. It looks like maybe people haven't gotten to that step yet. Maybe people are still adding their
Oh, okay.
to the document. So like I see under G6, there's a couple plus signs. So that's an example of what that might look like. So yeah, I guess if you haven't started doing plus signs, go ahead and start adding those. But also if you're still mulling on a recommendation, I don't want to rush you too much. So while people are adding their plus signs, are there any just general questions or observations that people have made that would maybe help you add your plus signs, or did you make any changes that you want to share with the broader group?
Katie, I just wanted to add, I'm not sure, I don't see Diana on this call, Diana Selby from State Forest Service. Is she one of the Leveraging Resources Committee members?
I don't think she's a formal member, but she does join.
Okay.
fairly often.
I know they did work on like program improvements for underserved landowners in 2025. That might just be another kind of useful column here to look for recommendations. I'm not sure where that document stands, given change in administration and things like that, but might be something to just reach out to her for when it comes to shaping some of these recommendations. There might be language in there that's helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Specifically around the match, I'll say. I think there was a lot of ideas in that document around that.
Okay, I put a little note in here just so that I have everything in one spreadsheet. Where is the match? Move that down. All right, I'm seeing some plus signs start to appear. To address the question in blue on H8, is this about awarding or reimbursements? This challenge or this pain point itself is both. It's kind of all of the above. There tend to be lags from the time of application to the time of awarding, and then the time of reimbursements and the time of implementation. Like all of those things are fall under that pain point.
Okay, that was me. And I feel like I do have details on what stalls state reimbursements.
Yes, it is.
All right, if you haven't yet, go ahead and put in your plus signs, and then I'm going to move us into the next part of our activity to dive into some of these. All right. Oops. All right, so feel free to keep looking through this if you're not done yet, but I'm going to go ahead and start moving us along. It looks like there are 3 of these recommendations that have any plus signs. The one about allowing state grants to cover administrative capacity, that's in G6. And then in H6, we've got identified need for sustained investment in local wood processing and workforce development, a wood stock study. And then in I-8, we have identify and remove barriers regarding the unused authorization in the state revolving loan program that allows for financing related to forest health. And it looks like that one has the most plus signs. Are there any other ones that people feel passionately about? I was going to go forward with the top 3. So it looks like those 3 are the ones that we will dive further into, unless somebody is like, no, I really want this other one. And we can always come back to some of the other ones for future, like for next year. But just trying to keep us in the reins for 2026. I figure if we can pick 3 for now that we're really wanting to dive deeper in on.
Katie, I'd be curious if Brett has any thoughts on the Forest Resilience Planning Guide. I think there could be a way to incorporate that into the first recommendation related to capacity funding that you could probably pair, if you're going to look at opening some of the grant programs, pair a requirement of using that document as a resource with that recommendation too.
Mm-hmm. With the
capacity funding.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect example of diving deeper into some of the top 3.
I think it could pull some elements of like column or row 9, columns G and H, some of those recommendations.
Yeah, I guess so. In row 6, the capacity one, column G, the possible recommendations, I added this paragraph that I'll bold just so people can see it. The capacity that's listed in the like first thing, that's not very little. That is administrative capacity. It takes administrative capacity to get all that, but that's a lot of different people with different skills, not necessarily a coordinator or a like program administrator. And I think that's where the Forest Resilience Planning Guide helps articulate what are all those different skills, how much of each. You hire someone, like hire a new staff, can you leverage other organizations that already have these? So maybe thinking about capacity in a different way beyond just administrative, but what I'm hearing, and I don't know if this is right, what I'm hearing from this, what's written here, is anything that's not paying someone to actually cut a tree or hold a drip torch or do a prescribed fire is considered like other stuff that is not supported well. And the only thing we're supporting well is paying contractors to do work on the ground. That's just kind of my interpretation of how the ask in column 6 and the other one that you pointed out, Amy, of earlier stages of readiness are coming together. But I think we can do better on how we articulate that beyond just administrative capacity. It's like the full spectrum. If you look at like State Forest Service, they have 5 divisions that support forest management. We support all those activities. And I think the Resilience Planning Guide offers a framework for that. I do see, and I appreciate there's a comment in there about like not making the Forest Resilience Planning Guide statutory, and maybe how do we make it recommendation and provide that flexibility. So just want to highlight that too.
Can I comment on that as a policymaker? Anything statutory like that will get a lot of pushback from local governments. There's a bill, one of the top first 10 bills of the legislative session on affordable housing, and it is getting massive, like just like last year, massive pushback from CML and all the counties, both organizations, from progressive to the conservative, and it is not well taken. So I just say anything statutorily and all that is probably not going to gain you much favor. So I just wanted to highlight that big time. So thanks. It's just, I just got out of the meeting where everyone's pretty angry. So I just wanted to share that. So
thank you for that. So I'm going to move us. If you go on the bottom, there's 2 different tabs. The second tab is refining top recommendations. So if you want to click into that, this is exactly the kind of conversation that I want to have. So since we're already talking about this one, why don't we go ahead and maybe start with column A6, and I'm just going to start taking some notes. I want to hear, what do we like about this recommendation? What clarification does it need? What detail does it need? What research do we need to do? How can we make this better and really shape this into what we want it to be? So those first couple notes, I'm going to just put in column F. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I'm thinking about capacity support, like beyond administrative, as Brett's saying. And I mean, I think does Furworm, I mean, are y'all thinking beyond Furworm's capacity grant? Like, does that not fit the need? And then I know that CoSwap, up to 20% of our funding goes for, can be spent on capacity in our LRI grants. So I just want to make sure that we're acknowledging like what does exist already, and like wondering if we're asking for more than like 20% of CoSwap and more than Furworm's capacity. I know Furworm's capacity, I think, is kind of competitive, and in the past, the council has recommended adding $1 million, I think, to that part of the program specifically. So that's another idea. If we think, like, in terms of what is the recommendation, it could be like adding more money to Furworm's capacity program, if that feels like it is successful, but there's not enough of it.
Yeah. And in the first tab, I think we got this recommendation using Furworm and CoSwap as kind of the model. And so looking at like, oh, this is something that is going really well. How can we expand it? So yeah, I think this is looking to expand, but also maybe the recommendation is also about how can we better inform, like what Brett is saying, how can we better inform what goes into that capacity funding, maybe using the Forest Resilience Planning Guide, if that makes sense. And another column that I have in here is this an administrative recommendation? Is this a legislative recommendation? One way that I could see this recommendation going is it's not necessarily a legislative recommendation, but it is a recommendation to kind of refine the grant programs using the Forest Resilience Planning Guide. Like, how can we help inform some of that stuff? I think that could be a direction that we take this. What else? What else are we seeing in this one?
I think to Courtney's point, I think you would need to identify which state programs you might be targeting, compare the definitions of capacity to decide if those are appropriate to this expanded conversation around capacity, and then decide, is it a plus up of resources, or is there truly an expansion of that capacity definition that we think is warranted or something to consider? Because, you know, in terms of administrative, legislative, or other, it kind of depends on all of those pieces. Because you might have recommendations that wouldn't necessarily, in a world where maybe there's different budget constraints and resources as an option, maybe that would make more sense, but you could be doing some enabling recommendations to get those capacity definitions in a place when more funding might be viable, that they would achieve these expanded goals.
I think the question is have we gotten to a point for CoSwap and Firmware to pull out the capacity pieces of those grants and put them in their own thing? Because I'm on the Firmware, and I can tell you that, I think it's 20%. I think it was close to 2 million, 1.8 million or something we had for out of 7, I believe, or 8 million. So it's a percentage, but have we gotten to a point where it needs its own thing? Because I can tell you, when we're looking at those as a whole, to me, at least to me, it gives me a little bit of heartburn when people are asking for equipment or something to do something on an HOA when we're trying to impact statewide. And yes, those are capacity needs for that HOA or whatever it is, but the impact of that is relatively small. I mean, so having its own category or potentially its own grant, that's my question to people. Do you think it needs to be its own thing? Have we gotten to that point?
Well, I'll just say from CoastWalk's perspective, I would not advocate for removing any capacity funding from our grant and putting it into another grant because it's imperative for like the projects to run and the grantees to operate their programs, like to have it as a part of their grant. Because I wouldn't want to just be an implementation grant. So, but if you're talking about having an additional program or funding source.
And again, there's so many out there too, right? So
Yeah, it doesn't seem particularly likely to pass
yeah.
a new program. Did we at one point, I know we had talked about increasing the furworm capacity section. Was there a recommendation about like removing the sideboards around it generally, or like is that 20%? Does it have to be at least 20% goes to capacity, or is it only maximum of 20% goes to capacity? Or is there a way that maybe we can integrate the capacity stuff better into the implementation, like what Courtney's talking about, because it is really important to have both sides of that. Jody, go ahead. And then
I'm
Laura.
trying to remember, was it last year or the year before we had asked for another $1 million added to that capacity of the workforce? And I don't remember if it was ongoing, but I think it was the 20% plus this other $1 million. Is maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know if that was for 1 year or for 2 years. I don't remember how long that was funded or if that got clawed back. And so what we're having in some conversations in the leveraging resources is, the legislative committee, sorry, it's Monday, been a long day already, that maybe we need to put recommendations and fight for what, like Senate Bill 5 to be continued and other things that have been funded. Maybe we need to, knowing what the conversations already are happening on the JBC and other things, maybe we need to really recommend and fight for maintaining what we have at this point. That might be also, so I'm just not sure where that's at. So that's a question that I have, because I forgot to ask that on Friday, but that's something to think about, because we might need to ask to maintain the progress we've made. So just a food for thought. Thanks.
Yeah, I think if I'm remembering correctly, that is what ended up happening last time. Was we recommended the $1 million 1 year, and then the next year maybe we said we're not even going to ask for the $1 million, we're just going to ask to like not cut back the program. I don't know if I'm remembering that correctly. I've got Laura and then Brett.
Brett, if you have a response to Commissioner. Okay. My comment was really back to something that John just mentioned and kind of relates to the example that I pointed to of the CPW and GOCO Regional Partnerships Initiative. The way they've set up their granting program, if those of you are familiar, please add to this or clarify or anything like that. It's one bucket of money that they have for that program every year, but they allow for different kinds of applications, so capacity, planning, and implementation. And you can check off one or more boxes in that application as an applicant. And they put caps on how much can be spent on certain types of funding. So it's a way to not split into a new program, like John might have suggested for capacity funding, but to still put kind of boundaries around how much of the funding can go to capacity, or the expectations of like, we don't want you to request $1 million just for capacity, but you can also kind of combine it with that implementation piece too. So just like an example to look to. I know that program is growing and changing and learning along the way too. So just wanted to kind of add that as something.
And which program was that, Laura?
The Regional Partnerships Initiative.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, I also was going to build on something John said. He must have struck a nerve with some of us, in a good way. The sort of the idea of potentially separating out what we're calling capacity funding into its own thing from implementation. I think that gets at what, right, that would help build systematic capacity so that groups could be ready to and apply and implement and report on whatever opportunity comes up in the future. Whereas I think the way that Foreworm and to some degree CoSwap straddles this are implementing capacity, it's project by project, and you're getting capacity to plan and implement a specific project. But that's not sort of, I think as a leverage resources community, how can we see the next level rather than capacity for a project, capacity to implement forest resilience. So that's probably not going to be solved on this call, but I like that idea. And I think CoSwap has gone this way a little bit more of saying, we're going to give a focal area, a county, some funds and show us how you're being strategic, and this plays in with your overall plan, right? More of that kind of systematic. You have to have a plan, but it's more than that. It's the reporting, the communication, it's all those components, right? Not just planning. So I don't know, just kind of put that, I kind of like where Don's going, but I hear how that's going to take a little while to think about, but there are other models from other states. There have been federal programs in the past that supported this like systematic capacity, not tied to specific projects.
Okay, let's hear John and then Courtney, and then I have a thought as well.
I just to go back to my question or thought, so I don't know how much CoSwap has for capacity, but or in their total budget, but I mean I think firmware is somewhere between, it's like $8 million or something, 8 or 10, somewhere around there. What if we had a capacity building grant that was the same size? What would that buy us instead of peeling off $1 million or $2 here and $1 million or $2 there out of these grants? And I don't think we got to 2 million in firmware this year for capacity. So having its own thing might buy us more, I guess is my point. And again, we have tons of grants. It's more confusing than it needs to be. I don't know. I think those are other maybe topics here, but or they were on the list, but
Courtney, do you have a response to the Brett and or John?
Yeah, I think it's just like in the same conversation. I hear what you're saying about maybe even needing funding that's more separate, like from projects. And my impression of the Furworm capacity projects is that they aren't tied to projects themselves. Like Furworm has fuels projects, but then it also has capacity projects. And I thought what it meant was like the city of Longmont could literally just have a grant for growing capacity. Like that isn't tied to a project at all. So I'm wondering if what y'all are discussing is different than this. And John, you seem to know quite a bit. My impression is that these grants aren't tied to projects. Or maybe, yeah, we could learn more about that. And okay, yeah, Aaron is saying sometimes they're tied, but they don't have to be. So this could potentially be something that already exists that could be funded more. And what I'm also wondering if I'm hearing is something more like a block grant. And I don't have a lot of information on block grants, but I think they're kind of grants with very little oversight that just say like, here's $200,000 to do your work. And maybe that could be that kind of style of grant is what you're thinking people might need. I'm not trying to correct anybody. I'm just trying to refine if we need like another type of grant or another type of funding. Maybe I'm trying to figure out how it's different than Furworm's capacity grants.
I don't really want another grant either, but I mean, I'm just trying to get the biggest bang for the buck, so.
I wonder if there could be something. Isn't there a grant program out there where they like alternate years, where it's like all the funding this year is capacity and all the funding this year is implementation, and so you can kind of pair them that way? I don't know if that's desirable in any way, but that's a thought if we wanted to be able to say like more people are getting more capacity funding at once, or like be able to give bigger sums of money. And feel free to take notes in the spreadsheet as well. I'm trying to take notes and listen at the same time, and it's a little tough. So edit as much as you please. Go ahead, Commissioner.
When I'm just curious, maybe I'm trying to clarify what we're asking. Are we asking for there be another grant, a block grant? Are you changing, refining? I'm just curious what we're looking at. Just because I'm just wondering, knowing that some of the meetings I've been in, also kind of, I may, can't hurt to ask. You never know, but I'm just want to be realistic for what we might be facing with some of the conversations at the state legislature if we're looking to, and I don't know if that's recommendations for the departments to change, but also want to signal that we're in the middle of a transition towards the end of this year. Will be a change in administration who might have a whole nother nuance or variable to some of the work. And so I just wanted to kind of talk about the elephant in the room, just kind of thought for that, because that, and I don't know what that looks like. And we don't know what that looks like. So just curious. So just something in the back of your heads, just curious about that.
Yeah, I think that's what we're trying to figure out, as far as, are we looking at creating something new versus changing things that already exist? That's kind of the question that's up in the air right now. Go ahead, Amy.
I don't know whether it makes sense to jump to one of the other recommendations, because it feels like there's strong agreement from this committee that funding for capacity and pre-planning work is an essential element for leveraging resources, and more work needs to be done to see whether existing grant programs already have an expansive definition of capacity that covers some of these lessons learned, and whether it's more of right-sizing resources or if there truly is more of a recommendation. So I just don't think we're going to come to conclusions on this call, but certainly could use some more diving into to formalize a recommendation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. And the time is already flying away. So go ahead, Commissioner, and I'll go on.
And I'll be brief. I just wanted to highlight a conversation we had legislative committee, because we saw, and we wanted to have a workforce development for high schoolers, get them kind of before they move on into junior college, after college, for to introduce them and get them out there. And then I found out in my own county, I didn't know about this project through the Poudre School District, where they had graduated 40 kids over a weekend and some days in class, and I was like, wait a minute, when did this happen? So I had a lot of conversations. What I found out is that is funded through the Fire Commission, and they actually went to them and asked them to do this. And then they funded it through a workforce development grant through the Workforce and Development Department. And there's some of those grants that they're working on right now called the Big Three, and they're trying to get that funded. And so I feel like there's some of those areas that when we talk about blended and braided, especially when it comes to workforce capacity, it's not something we have touched or looked to what we can partner and bring all that together for what we need and what maybe students are looking for. So I just wanted to highlight that again. As I don't know if we've had a conversation about other areas to have them come and use their grant funding for something that we're looking for that might be overlapping with workforce. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that. I'm putting a few notes in the spreadsheet about next steps on this one and research needs on this one. I think I agree with Amy that it's probably not going to be fleshed out right now. So some of the things I'm putting in for research needs, looking into definitions of capacity in existing programs, what current programs are already doing, beyond what we've already heard, because some of them we've already looked at in the first tab of the spreadsheet. What does the Forest Resilience Planning Guide say about capacity needs and how we can direct those? And then maybe look into like the next administration's priorities and how that might shape what we do next with this. Does that sound okay? And then maybe we can move on to, let's see, it looks like this A4, identify and remove barriers regarding the unused authorization state revolving loan program. That one has the next most plus signs. So maybe we can dive into that one in our next couple minutes and see if we can, if that one's a little more tangible at this point in where we're at.
I put this recommendation in there, just, also not wanting to recreate a wheel if there's already an existing loan program that has authority for forest health. So I don't think that I know the state revolving loan program that's operated primarily by the Colorado Water and Power Development Authority has authority for forest health. It's never been used to my knowledge in Colorado. So I know others have been looking at this, folks from the Nature Conservancy, I think Christina Burry with the Colorado State Forest Service. So this is one where there's some key players that I think we would want to loop in with some folks that are already looking at this. And again, may be ripe when these programs are more fully funded. I think they've taken some big hits with federal funding dips. But if we're looking for a loan program that could be used for either bridge financing or large scale projects, we could look at a loan program that already exists with the state that has this authority.
Awesome. Thank you for that clarification. Do you know where, like who at the Nature Conservancy is working on this and where they're at with it? Is it something that they have it pretty fleshed out and could kind of pass along and we can support what they're working on already, or where does this stand?
My understanding is I think a lot of these conversations are preliminary, but others in this group or Courtney may know more than me on this. And I don't know whether there would be any legislative recommendations or whether it's more so finding the right partners and case studies to try some of this.
Something that the Colorado Fire Commission does that I've been really interested in, and I've talked to you, Courtney, about before, is they have, say, an issue like this where it's like, okay, this is an idea that a lot of people are interested in. There's a lot of people working on it, both on the Forest Health Council and off. Could we create some kind of like a subgroup that works on that and really dives into it? And then that way, when the recommendation does come up, it's like really well informed and there's all different kinds of entities on it. And then the Forest Health Council can kind of bring our standing and our, our credibility, I guess, to that recommendation that's been co-developed by a lot of different people. Does that sound like maybe something we could do there? And I don't know, maybe that's even the recommendation is like to dive deeper into it.
Was the body you were saying, Katie, as like a subgroup of this committee or another committee? I think I missed those first few words, or just it's external.
Kind of a vague idea. I think in our case, maybe it's a subgroup of this committee. I don't know. That's definitely open for discussion though.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that the Fire Commission does this committee does a pretty great job also at having outside voices in, like it's more than just council members on this committee. I think that really informs and like brings robustness to the conversation. So I think if there wanted to be another grouping of people that was pretty self-organizing maybe and included outside members who had more expertise on this or could really dive into it, I think that seems like a way to get to a robust recommendation.
Mm-hmm. Amy, if I wanted to look into something like that, who would I go to at the Nature Conservancy?
I mean, I guess, Katie, one of the things we would decide, this does seem like a similar topic of the conversations related to forest improvement districts where people are like, hey, there's this authority in statute and it hasn't been used. Why is that? So I do think there's some good lessons learned on, and you would be a better expert on how the subject matter specific committee has worked with the Fire Commission, but potentially this could follow a similar path or could be added as, here's what we learned with forest improvement districts. Here's another element that's existing in statute that we haven't used. Why is that? But some of the contacts with the Nature Conservancy, I think Paige Lewis is on the Forest Health Council still. Courtney, I'm looking at you, would be a good place to start.
Okay.
Potentially. But it's something to think about, just as we consider where to go with recommendations of this committee. I think there's still some of those timeline pieces to figure out. If this committee had a legislative recommendation, how does that work?
Mhm.
And if there's not a desire to see administrative recommendations, what is the purpose of this committee? So maybe it is something to think about whether site-specific or issue-specific committees make sense for the Forest Health Council in general.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I think there's a bigger conversation about administrative recommendations. And I think that actually there could be an interesting place in the middle where if there's an administrative recommendation that's a change to like current practices, that doesn't actually require a lot of capacity. I think the ones that were a lot of capacity was like convene something with many partners. But if it's like, when you run your grant program, you should be considering these things. That doesn't take a lot of capacity. That changes like, that's a change in resources. That's a change in mindset. There's a change in ranking practices. So I think I know we said no administrative recommendations, and I think that's when some staff are really burdened with new tasks. But I think that there's a great place for administrative recommendations that like change the way things are done as opposed to adding a lot of work. So maybe I feel bad when I hear that those are off the table. I'm like, maybe they should be back on the table. But also a good question about like how should committees be formulated? I think that's a great question.
I like sort of aligning with the 30-year vision of the council. How do we, mindset and culture shift? How does the council make recommendations to do that? I think we also would want to coordinate very carefully with sometimes people or agencies or entities are doing things and sort of need to be told to do something different. But a lot of times hopefully we always work in partnership and know the consequences of whatever recommendation you're doing before we share it. It might be a low lift on you, Courtney, and the council, but not the people we're recommending it for.
Right.
But I like connecting to like the 30-year vision. Not everything has to be legislative. Like we should be able to move that forward in other ways.
I'll just say that even at the February meeting, I think we want to be leading a discussion about how the 30-year vision, like how the council can support it moving forward and what are the different options for tracking and facilitating implementation. So, and like, is it through the way committees are structured, or more resources for the council? So I think these are kind of connected.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm looking at the time again, and these meetings always go so fast, and then sometimes I feel like we're left with more questions than answers. So looking ahead, we've got one more meeting, not next week, but the following. Is that right, Courtney? And then we have the full council meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got 2 weeks to kind of flesh these out. I'm just going to spitball here and then take some feedback. So what I am thinking for next steps would be to reach out to Paige Lewis and Christina regarding this first recommendation and kind of get an idea of what's going on already and where there might be opportunity for this committee to help support that or build on what they're working on. I think for this third recommendation, it sounds like we've got a lot of ideas, but we still need a lot of refining. I don't think we're probably going to be able to come up with something before the February meeting. I think definitely we've got a lot to work on. And so maybe that's giving us direction for our following meetings, but I'm not sure if we're going to have something ready unless people want to put in a lot of work outside of the committee. And then we didn't even get to this second one. I would be happy to follow up with a couple of people outside of the call if people have, this one seems really specific, if there are people who have like pretty specific ideas on it, or maybe we just focus on the first one. I'm not totally sure. So that's kind of where I'm at. And then we've got our one last meeting before the full council meeting where whatever is done in between, we can kind of tie up. What feedback or other advice do you all have? And somehow I pinned Kirk Will on my screen. I don't know if other people see that, but sorry if everyone has him pinned for some reason.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Yeah.
You're not pinned on my screen.
Okay, it might just be my screen.
I think that sounds like a good idea, and I think just continuing to coordinate with I can start an email thread with Jody and the legislative committee to make sure there's coordination around what's going to move forward. What is this committee thinking about? What is that committee thinking about? Just so that there's collaboration, coordination leading up to the February 11th meeting. So I can start an email thread between us.
Okay, that sounds great. All right, thanks, Kirk. Now you'll be unpinned.
And I guess, Katie, what might be helpful, I'm getting a little lost as to what we're shooting for with the full Forest Health Council based on some of the conversations about the role of this committee versus the legislative committee and what recommendations can and can't be on the table, knowing that there's still a lot of work to formulate some of these ideas and pull together thoughts, but I think I'm getting a little lost as to what our target is.
Do you mean our target for like what we're wanting to have by that meeting?
Right. I mean, I guess at the broader Forest Health Council meeting, we'll hear the recommendations from the legislative committee and do some sort of vote. But what I think we've had some crumbling of kind of what this committee can and can't do. Even if we could pull it off by the February meeting. So are we just in general talking about things that ideas that we're pushing for down the road?
Well, yeah, so I think my hope was that we would know before that meeting, like if we were even going to have legislative, because we know that the legislative committee is coming in with legislative recommendations like that. We know that that is their plan. And so I think my hope was that by the end of this meeting, we would know, like, do we even have legislative recommendations? Like, we don't want to take them off the table for this committee, but we weren't sure, like, maybe we'll need them, maybe we won't. And so I was hoping to know that by the end of this committee meeting, so that then if there needs to be coordination and things to figure out as far as like what we're allowed and what we're not, then that conversation could happen before the full council meeting. I don't feel like we have like come to where I was hoping to be as far as knowing for a fact, like, yeah, we want to recommend this legislative thing. And so I think we at least should have that conversation probably at the next full council meeting. Like, I think it would be nice to at least be able to say, like, this is a barrier that we're running into as a committee. Like, can we talk about this? But I don't know if we necessarily need to worry about like, oh, well, we have this legislative recommendation and we want to put it forth. So I don't know if we need to have the conversation in that way, but I think at least bringing it up as like for future reference, we're we're having this challenge in our committee and we need some help or feedback or direction. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know if we need to come in and say, we've got this legislative recommendation, are we allowed to pass it? But instead we could just say, like, for the future, this is what's on our mind. And with that in mind, I guess that kind of takes the time limit off of this, because I was thinking we have this time limit of the February meeting, but maybe we don't anyway, since we probably won't have legislative recommendations by then anyway. Go for it.
Yeah, I'll just say the legislative committee did have a placeholder for this committee if it wanted to put in a recommendation. And I think it, like you're saying, Katie, it could have been helpful to say right at this point, hey, we are confident we are going to be putting together a recommendation related to revolving loan funds. At this point, it probably doesn't seem like it's possible to say whether or not there will be a recommendation. It seems like maybe we're still a little far off from that. So agreed, it might not be that timely. If there was something that this committee thought it would have ready by February 11th, there's a placeholder at in the legislative committee. And so I think there's a place for this to be included in that way. I don't necessarily see that happening in this short amount of time, like with 1 more hour between now and then.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking too. I thought maybe there would be, but it's not looking like there will be. And so in that case, but I do think it's worth having the conversation, because I do feel like we've been at this point where it's like, well, we shouldn't make this kind of recommendation. We shouldn't make this kind of recommendation. And I would like some maybe broader Forest Health Council feedback on, like, how can we be more effective as a committee in both our structure generally, but also in, like, what recommendations are we trying to make here? What's our scope? I think maybe maybe that's our update, is leading a conversation like that with the full council. I don't know.
Would it be helpful to at least say, like, to the legislative committee, that this group identified that they're, like, one of the major barriers that could benefit from a legislative recommendation is around state revolving loan programs? Like, you could just tell them that today and say, we don't necessarily have, like, a specific recommendation around it, but this is our kind of recommended barrier to potentially address. And they might have more, it sounds like they might have more of the expertise or knowledge to think of something around that ahead of February, or just, like, actionize that kind of identified barrier and some solutions around it.
I think that's a good idea, although I don't think that'll work with their timeline.
Yeah.
We lost Brett.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're over time, but I think is it one step further of, like, hey, we've been dealing with these barriers, one of which is in either financing or bridge loans. We know there's this existing authority, something we're thinking about. But at this point, it looks like, are we targeting 2028, which is just, like, getting more clarifications on just where we should take some of these ideas, or whether it's just as simple as that, of, like, here's some things that we know need discussion at some point.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of off topic. This is like committee organization. And one thing I've been thinking about, and I think it also has to do with how the whole council chooses to move forward with the 30-year vision, but having more committees be focused on subject matter rather than processes, like the process of leveraging resources, the process of legislative recommendations, more subject matter expertise committees, and then those committees each have the power to do legislative recommendations or administrative recommendations that don't add a lot of, or administrative recommendations that either come with resources for increased capacity or work within existing capacity. So I think there's a bigger brainstorming that needs to happen about how the council gets work done, period. And I think we're bumping into the limitation on the current structure and how it like can be fruitful.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we could almost have this committee identify, like, these are the, which we've pretty much already done, like, these are some of the leveraging resources needs.
Yeah.
And now if we can, like, as the committee, direct these subject matter committees, I think that would be really helpful, because I just feel like we just get so lost. It's like we have these big broad topics and then we get really in the weeds on one, but then we have all these other things. Like it's just been really tough to wrap my head around. And yeah.
Yeah, that kind of task force and like work group model is often, in my experience with like larger coalitions, partnerships, councils, things like that, is a way to, like, each of these top recommendations could be its own work group for the year of 2026. And it's like, you could ask those people to kind of work on things and then report out at these monthly meetings to kind of divvy up the capacity and accountability as well. But a question came up for me was like, is there like an org chart for the Forest Health Council? Like, I know that there's the council and then there's the two committees, but I wasn't sure or certain if there had been kind of thought beyond that or organization. And it sounds like, Courtney, I think you're right on that. You're butting into, like, as you move towards like implementing ideas, what does that actually look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I would love to see this group be like a steering committee and then have task force to implement. Because I think we would just come up with so much better, more robust recommendations. Because I don't really want our committee's contribution this year to be like, you know, identify and remove barriers related to this unused authorization. I would love for our committee's contribution to be like, we did identify and we did remove the barriers. Like, here's the really awesome thing that you can put down, and the legislature just says that looks really well researched, and like, let's do it. So and we're going way off and way over. I appreciate you guys giving extra time.
I think an example, like the Forest Resilience Planning Guide, is an example of like how that practice could work. Like, it took a smaller, like, assigned group of people to really like carry forward that recommendation and resources to do so. And so if that helps kind of make it real or give an example of like what that could look like and how it does result in the things you want to be doing, that was essentially a work group or a task force.
Yeah, I think I'll put this on the agenda for the February 11th meeting.
That would be great.
For the whole council to discuss. And if we need to or want to talk more about it, even at the next meeting, or have a separate meeting about it, we can do that. Like, a way that the council can be organized and the committees can be organized, where they have the capacity or the time to dive in fully and create robust recommendations, but then they also have like the authority to make recommendations that would, you know, support their findings, or that bring their findings, you know, into the sphere of implementation.
Yeah, and I'd be curious if that would get more involvement from more of the council members too, because I think some people don't want to join the Leveraging Resources Committee because they don't know how relevant it'll be. But if they knew, oh, it's specifically on this thing that I'm really interested in and good at, and then they'd be more willing to join a shorter term task force as opposed to being on one of these committees forever and always.
Yeah. That's the way the Fire Commission operates.
And maybe, Katie, that's how we can spend some of this time ahead of the Forest Health Council, is less like, hey, let's talk to Paige Lewis and get her feedback on X, Y, or Z. Is like, we're maybe at a good stopping point of, hey, you know, here's a set of recommendations and some issue areas that we think could be further explored. How does this council want to approach that?
Because I think our issue areas are really good. there's really a lot of interest because we can dive into each one for 15 minutes at a time. So yeah, maybe that's the February 11th topic, is like, these areas are really well researched. How can we move forward on each one besides just fragmented conversations every month?
Well, good job moving us forward. I know we're over time, but let me know how I keep helping.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate all three of you. You've been really helpful the last forever. So,
Yeah, you know how to reach me and that I love thinking about these things and supporting all this. So please don't hesitate to reach out if, like Courtney, if you want to think about structure or like put even like a diagram together of like, it could work this way. I'm more than happy to think about that with you and help with that.
awesome. Thank you. And Courtney, we got to let you go because you have way too much going on in anticipation of Thursday's event.
Yes, I'm excited and there's a lot going on. So yes, we can adjourn the meeting.
All right. Yes. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all so much. And we'll talk soon.
Okay.